All right, in this video we're going to look at dividing integers or dividing real numbers. The first thing to get out of the way, just like we did in the last video, is to look at zeros. With zeros and integers or dividing, it causes just a little bit of a grief because, like when you take a look at these, one of these answers makes sense and the other one doesn't. I guess I'm pointing to the two there. If you have 0 things and you divide them into -5 units, I guess that sounds like a little funny bit of a question, but your answer to that is 0. Dividing into 0 units doesn't make sense. Like if you have a quarter, you get one thing out of 4 total. But if you don't have like any total, or if you're like here, this would be like a cake divided into 4 sections. It doesn't make sense to divide things into 0 sections. And so when we're looking at integers and dividing integers, dividing by 0 doesn't make sense. So we use this little symbol just to say that's undefined. In later classes, we'll actually look at a question like this where we'll say this expression is fine, except there might be one number that causes us grief on the bottom. And that's whatever number I plug in here that would put a 0 on the bottom. And zeros on the bottom are undefined, we can't do that. So in this case here, if I put a positive 3 there, 3 take away 3 is 0, that's on the bottom of a fraction, or I'm dividing by 0, I can't do that, that would be undefined. So this expression here, this is for later, but it's defined for every value of x except for a positive 3. Okay, so now when we're dividing numbers, one of the things that we do, and you might have heard of the term invert and multiply, and that's what we do. So when we're dividing integers or when we're dividing fractions, we're going to invert and multiply. So the first thing, this invert thing, what does that mean? Invert just means to determine what the reciprocal of a number is. And the reciprocal is simply flipping the fraction over. So if the numerator is 3, the denominator is 4, the reciprocal of that would be 4/3. Notice that they're not equal to each other. I put an arrow there. These two aren't equal to each other, but they are reciprocals of each other. Or I think the book uses the term the multiplicative inverse. That's a nice word to remember. Here's another example. So -3/7, the reciprocal of that would be 7/-3. Now notice the negative sign in a fraction can be placed in a lot of different places. I could place it like this, that would be correct. But I also could put that negative sign up top. Or I could be non-committal and put it in the middle. That's sort of a rhyme in math. And so that would be correct too. So you can't lose the negative sign, so you don't lose it at all. It's just that it has to be placed either at the bottom, the top, or in the middle. Typically, you'll see in the textbook they'll use one of those two methods. Often they use the last one. So, for example, and if you want to pause the video, you can and see if you can write the reciprocals for each of those, and then press play. So this one would be 6/5. This one would be 5/-2. I guess I have the answers underneath there. Or this one doesn't have a fraction on. Oh, but I remember that any whole number is really over 1, so the reciprocal of that would be 1/7. And then the flip of this would be 6/-11, or I could write it as -6/11. Okay, hopefully that helps you. Now, just in terms of the signs when you're dividing numbers or real numbers, signs are the same as we did with multiply. If you have one negative, you're stuck with it. So your answer is still negative. If you have two negatives, they cancel, and your answer is positive. Or more globally, if you have an odd number of negatives and you're dividing, your answer is negative. If you have an even number of negatives and you're dividing or multiplying, your answer is positive. We'll just try a couple. So here, to divide the fractions, I'm going to invert and multiply. So that's the rule that we were talking about later or earlier. So the first number stays by itself, and then this divide changes to times, and I flip this one over. or I make it the reciprocal. And then I could simplify from there. So I could go 2 times 5 times 5 over 5 times 2 times 2 times 2, if you wanted to do it that way. So the 5s will cancel, this 2 or this 2 will cancel, so my answer comes out to 5 over 4. If you sort of like canceling through here, you could do that. 5 goes into itself once and into here 5. 2 goes into itself once and into there 4. You'll see you're coming up with the same answer. Another example, 1/3 divided by 5. So it'd be 1/3, you leave the first one, flip the second one over. Now this one originally is 5 over 1, so when I invert it, it'll be 1 over 5. And then I change the divide to times. So the answer 1 over 15. This last question, negatives, this is good. Let's deal with the negatives right off the bat. It's dividing. There's 2 negatives, they'll cancel. So I know my answer is positive. I get that out of the way. So I write my 5, 6, I change the divide to a times, and I flip this one over to 13 over 10. Notice I'm not even worried about the sign anymore because I know the final answer is positive. 5 goes into 10 twice, so my answer will be 13 over 12. Right? This once, this twice. So 1 times 13 is 13, 6 times 2 is 12. So this would be correct, or you could write it as a mixed number. Here's a couple more. Maybe pause and then try them and press play and see how you do. Okay, I'm assuming you press play again. Here's the answers that I got for both of those questions. So in dividing, just as a summary, when you're dividing 2 numbers, say 2/3 divided by -1/4, if you're dividing 2 fractions, leave the first one alone, change the divide to times, find the reciprocal of that, which would be 4 over 1 with a negative sign somewhere in there. Let's put it at the top. And then to simplify this, or to actually multiply the 2 fractions now, I only have one negative sign, so I know my answer in the end is going to be negative. 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 1 is 3. So there would be my final answer. Okay, hopefully that helps out. Practice some in your book.